The gravel shook that morning like it was ready to split apart. 3 rusty pickup trucks lined across my driveway, engines rattling, and a group of bulky men in black polos stepped out, flashing fake security badges stitched on crooked. Karen strutted in behind them like a queen with her red suit blazing, heels cracking on stone, and she pointed her clipboard at me like it was a loaded gun. They shouted that I was trespassing on my own land, barking that they had authority. And for a moment, I felt my stomach tighten with the absurd thought. What if they actually managed to push me off the very ground I bought with my own hands? I didn't move, didn't flinch, but inside, my blood was boiling. And at the same time I had this tiny knot of doubt twisting, because Karen had been relentless for months. Always lurking, always sending letters. She'd stuffed notes under my gate warning me about unpainted fence posts, sent envelopes stamped with an HOA logo, claiming I owed dues to a board I wasn't even part of. I burned every single one in the wood stove. Figured she'd get the message. She never did. This cabin was supposed to be my escape from all that HOA nonsense, grass fines, driveway citations, those ridiculous threats about trash bins. I bought it because it smelled like freedom, because the air up here was filled with pine smoke and birds instead of HOA board voices. But of course, Karen built her oversized house down the road, leveled half a forest to do it. And ever since she's treated the ridge like her kingdom. And now here she was, parading these cops up my driveway, swearing my cabin was under her HOA's authority. One of the guys puffed his chest, grabbed the lock on my gate, and rattled it hard enough to shake the hinges, and growled, "We can do this the easy way or the hard way." I sipped my coffee and tried not to laugh, but I could feel the heat crawling up my neck. Easy way. Hard way? These guys looked like a motorcycle club that lost its bikes and decided clip on badges would fix it. Karen screeched from behind them that she'd have me evicted, that her team had every right to drag me out. For a split second, I wondered if I was the fool here, buying land off the beaten path, thinking I could just live free. What if she found some loophole, some technicality to ruin everything? I looked at the cabin I'd spent months patching up, the porch I rebuilt with my own hands, the woods behind me alive with morning birds. And I'll be honest, I felt that flicker of weakness. Maybe I should just sell, maybe it wasn't worth a war. But then I heard it. The floorboards creaking inside. My cousins were waking up. Jake, tall as a barn beam, and Mark, broad as a brick wall. Both former Army, both family. The thought of them stepping onto that porch shifted something in me. I remembered why I came here, to never live under someone else's thumb again. Karen's HOA had no claim here, and no clipboard in the world was going to change that. The screen door swung open, and out came Jake first, rubbing his eyes, squinting at the lineup of trucks. Mark followed behind, yawning like a bear. They weren't in uniforms anymore, but the way they carried themselves, you could see the military in them. The so-called security squad shifted when they noticed, their tough guy act faltering just a hair. Jake leaned on the porch rail, arms folded, and said with a straight face, "Officers, huh? You boys look more like mall cops who lost your segways." That line landed like a hammer. A couple of them cursed under their breath, but their eyes darted sideways. Karen tried to rally, waving her clipboard like a saber. "These men are trespassing," she screamed. "My officers will remove them." Mark just shook his head and muttered, "Lady, this is his land. He owns it." What part of that don't you understand? Karen's face went scarlet. She whipped out a megaphone, yes, a damn megaphone, from her SUV and started blasting at full volume that I was in violation of HOA law, that my cabin was illegal, that her security had authority higher than the county sheriff. I couldn't even hold back my laughter. Higher than the sheriff? Next, she'd be saying she outranked the governor. Neighbors began peeking from down the road. Phones out, recording the whole circus. Her men tried to look mean, leaning against trucks, cracking knuckles. But you could see it. They weren't built for this. They were built for standing around in parking lots, not staring down men who'd seen real combat. I set my mug down and said steady and calm, "Step across that gate and you're trespassing. You'll answer in court, or sooner." The leader with mirrored shades actually had the nerve to bark back. "HOA security is above county authority." That was when I knew the show had reached its breaking point, because I almost spit out my coffee from laughing. Even my cousins were chuckling. But they didn't need to say much. The air itself was changing, the ground starting to vibrate beneath our boots. At first it was faint, just a low hum, but then it rolled stronger, deeper. That wasn't thunder. That was horsepower. Karen froze, megaphone halfway to her lips. The men stiffened, eyes cutting toward the ridge. I just smiled slow and said, "Karen, you ever hear a war drum? Because that's what's coming." And then they appeared. Harleys. A dozen of them. Chrome glinting in the sun, engines roaring like lions. They came down the ridge in formation, tight and disciplined, dust billowing behind them. These weren't random bikers. These were my cousin's brothers, in arms. Veterans who'd fought overseas. Men who'd seen things that would make these wannabe enforcers wet themselves. The effect was immediate. One of the security guys muttered, "Oh, hell no," and took a step back. Another's cigarette shook in his hand. Even their leader's sunglasses slipped down his nose as he swallowed hard. Karen tried shouting into her megaphone again, but her voice cracked, her words drowned out by the roar. She looked like she was trying to hold back a tidal wave with a piece of paper. The Harleys fanned out across the road, kickstands slamming in unison, a wall of leather and steel. My cousin Danny led the pack, pulling off his helmet, his face carved by desert sun, eyes hard but calm. He looked at the scene, then at me, then at Karen, and asked in a voice steady enough to freeze the air, "What's going on here?" Karen actually tried to blurt that this was HOA territory, waving her clipboard like a badge. Danny just tilted his head, glanced at the cabin behind me, the deeded land under our boots, and said, "Funny, looks like private land to me." The riders chuckled, a low rolling sound that cut through her shrieking. Another veteran stepped forward, Tommy, arms tattooed with anchors and eagles, and leaned close enough for Karen to smell the leather. "Sweetheart, the only jurisdiction you've got is over whether your latte's iced or hot." Her so-called officers weren't holding anymore. They looked at each other, waiting for someone to lead. But no one wanted to. Karen screamed at them to move in, but their boots stayed planted. Danny stepped closer, boots crunching, and said softly, "Back where we come from. Security means protecting people, not bullying neighbors. You hear her? That's not leadership. That's desperation." The silence that followed was suffocating. One man muttered he wasn't paid enough for this, turned, and walked straight to his truck. Another followed. The leader tried to bark them back, but his voice broke. Karen lost it, shrieking that they were cowards. Firing them on the spot like this was an HR meeting. Danny smirked and said, "Fired from what? Pretending to be cops?" The riders laughed, dark and heavy, and the last few officers cracked. Trucks revved, tires squealed, and in minutes they were gone, bolting down the road like rats escaping a flood. And then it was just Karen, standing there in her red suit, hair frizzed, lipstick smeared, gripping her clipboard with shaking hands. A dozen veterans stared at her, calm as stone, and she finally realized her army was gone. My neighbors down the road shouted, laughing, filming her meltdown. One even yelled, "Hey, Karen, your security just ran like scared puppies." The riders grinned. Jake muttered, "She still thinks she's in control. Bless her heart." Mark chuckled, sharpening his knife. "Not for much longer." Karen tried one last stand, pointing that megaphone at me, screaming about noise pollution, HOA bylaws, fines for my cousin's bikes. Her words hit the air like wet tissue. Danny stepped forward, close enough she had to backpedal in her stilettos, and said quietly, "Lady, I fought warlords with more legitimacy than you, and you know what happened to them? They learned when to walk away." Her mouth opened, closed, no sound coming out. Her face drained pale. She turned, nearly tripping, stormed toward her SUV, and peeled off in a cloud of dust, tires spitting gravel. For a moment, all I could hear was the ticking of cooling Harley engines and the faint laugh of my cousins. I raised my coffee mug, still warm, and smiled. She'd brought fake soldiers to my land. I had brought real ones, and there was no mistaking who won. The lesson? Bullies only have power until you stop believing in it.